right, friends. Well, I think it's that time again. Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Coffee Call. Before I start, I just want if you guys can do me a huge favor and continue to share and post and like this page, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, to continue to support what we're trying to do. And like I said, a lot of you guys know that what we're trying to do is just talk to different people in diverse backgrounds, cultures, even faith expressions, even other religions, just to continue to talk about, who we are, where we come from, and hopefully we can continue to live into the gospel as the people of God as best as we can. And it's just been so interesting and such a good time to just talk to different brothers and sisters, not just locally or nationally, but internationally as well. And so even today, I have a wonderful guest, and I can't wait for you guys to hear her story. And so today, like I said, I have a wonderful guest on, and we're just going to right into it. She is actually the wife of one of my close friends that you guys have heard two episodes ago. And it was crazy because when I was actually getting ready to interview him, and I was talking about, we're talking about culture, we're talking about church, we're talking about faith. He said, "You know what? I'm down to do this show, Paul, but you should talk to my wife. She has a better story than I do. I'm just a guy from Hawaii." But her story is crazy. Literally took her everywhere, almost around the world. And so we're just going to bring her on and listen to what she has to say, and also talk about what it means to be one of women of color in ministry, because she is also a pastor's wife, and not just pastor's wife, but partner in ministry with my brother. So we're going to introduce her. Please welcome my good sister, Mele Teaupa. Here we go. What's going on, Mele? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Well, thank you for coming on Coffee Call.
Thank you for having me. I'm very humbled.
Yeah, and so people don't know this, and I'm gonna be vulnerable because I like to be straight up. I messed up. I messed up on the time. Usually we do this around 9 or 10 here Pacific time, and then when I calculated the time, I realized I did the math wrong. Obviously, if we're gonna be stereotypical, I should have gotten it right because of what I am, but I got it wrong, and I'm gonna own it. So forgive me, Mele. Can I have your forgiveness on that?
Of
Um,
course, of course.
but I think it worked out because it's 2 o'clock here and it's 11 o'clock in Kauai,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
you're probably saying, "Thank God that I don't have to wake up at 7 a.m. to do this little thing that I want to do."
I was grateful.
Yeah, look at that. I love honesty. The humility also rises above that. It's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for just again just sharing your story. And people have to know, like, some of the people that I have on this call, I have a long relationship with. And
Mhm.
some of the people that I have this call, I barely met them like maybe a day ago, or just like the first time is probably seeing them on the show. And you're one of those cases where this is the first time seeing you, like 15 minutes before we were on, just talking. But I've heard so much about you. My brother Nafe, which we heard from a couple of shows ago, brags about you all the time. I remember being in seminary with him. He's all excited about getting married and all that stuff. And I was like, look at this guy. They're getting all giddy while we're talking about like God's wrath on people. He's like, "Bro, I'm about to get married, bro." And I was like, "That's cool. That's cool." And so welcome again. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit something about yourself, where you're from, where you've been, and kind of how you landed in Kauai right now, because that's not where you're originally from, right?
No, so I am tuning in from Kauai, Hawaii. But so my name is Mele. As Paul already mentioned, I'm married to Nafe, Pastor Nafe of West Kauai UNC at the moment. I'm fully Tongan. I was born in Tonga, but then at the age of 3, um, we migrated. My family migrated. Well, just me and my parents really moved to Australia, and there we spent 10 years. So
Oh.
basically, I went to Olive Elementary there, and then we came back to Tonga, and I went to high school in Tonga.
Before you go on, what do you like better? Do you like rugby or Aussie rules?
Aussie rules is I like rugby league.
Oh,
Rugby league.
all right, fine, okay.
As you
Continue.
mm.
Yes. Rugby
Uh,
league is okay. Did Nafe tell you to say that? Because I know he plays league.
oh no, he likes the All Blacks,
Oh,
which is
okay,
rugby
nice.
union. So no, I'm
Okay,
a big league fan. Big league fan.
awesome. Okay, go ahead.
So I went to high school in Tonga, and after I graduated, I ended up going to China for college. So I spent 5 years there,
Wow.
graduated from college, moved back to New Zealand where all my family ended up. Um, and then after 5 years in New Zealand, moved back to Australia. And then while I was in Australia, I met Nafe, and then um, he was in undergrad at the time last year, and then he went to seminary, and then his last year of seminary we got married. So
Wow.
I've been here for just over a year now in Kauai. So yeah, we've been here
All right.
together. We got married, and then I went back to Australia, got my stuff, and then we moved to Kauai together.
Oh, you've been jumping around all over the place, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think about it, but then when people ask me, I'm like, oh yeah, I was like somewhere there in that year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Out of all those places, what's your favorite? You know what I mean?
all of them have a special place in my heart. All
Oh,
of
look
them
at
were home
that.
at some point
That's
in
right.
time.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
So I can't say. Although I will say this: when I moved to Melbourne over 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, I always thought that that would be my forever home. And a week within arriving, I just had this like feeling. It was like really like strong feeling like this is not your forever home. And
Wow.
it really like baffled me. Like I told my flatmate at the time, I'm like, this is so weird because like she knew while I was in New Zealand the whole time. I was like, yes, I'm moving back to Australia. That's home for me because that's where
Wow.
I grew up. And then as soon as I got there, I'm like, this is not home. But and she
Mm,
kept asking me like, where is home then? I'm like, I have no idea.
wow. So
But
for
here
the
I
listen,
am.
yeah. So for the listeners out there, flatmate is roommate
Oh,
in English. I'm just messing with you. I think people know what you're talking about. I just wanted to poke fun. Right. So the interesting part is I do have relationships with some type of I do have a probably pretty good relationship with the Tongan community here in
mm,
California. I don't know a lot of Tongans that went to China, right? And I
mm,
know just by watching the news, Tonga and China do have some sort of relationship, whether that's financial or whatever. We don't want
mhm.
to get into that, right? But you being in China, that's what kind of sparked me is what is that about? You know? I mean, so tell me about a little bit that story. How did you get to China? What was your desires or yeah.
Well, I really had no plan on going to China. Like after I graduated high school, I just wanted to go to uni, which is college for
That's college in English for
American
everybody out there.
university for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I got, I think I was just working a little bit at the time. And then I got asked if I wanted to go to China on a scholarship and just randomly. And I was just like, yeah, sure. And then the scholarship officer was like, I'm being serious. It's for 5 years. And it kind of like, okay. So China was never really something that I thought about, but it was the
Mm,
opportunity and I took
wow.
it. So
So what did you do in China?
um, I studied international trade.
Mm,
So spent 5 years there. Like I said earlier, spent the first year just studying the language, and then the next 4 years studying my degree. But part of the requirements of the scholarship was that you had to do it in Chinese. So
wow.
that was quite an experience.
Yeah. So it seems like that you picked up some Mandarin then, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's do this right now. Say a phrase in Mandarin. Say, "Hi, my name is Mele. Nice to meet you. This is awesome, or this is cool."
你好，我叫玛丽，认识你们很高兴。
And we're done with the show. We're good. That was just interesting enough. That's crazy. And so yeah, so I think and so my next question is like, what is the biggest thing culturally that was like, oh my gosh, I'm not at home anymore, you know? There's a lot of the times where if you go to university, there can be international students and you kind of figure out what's going on, but there are moments because I remember, so even though I'm Korean American, I
Mhm.
remember going to Korea and realizing everybody's Korean. You know what I mean? Like I get off the plane, the ticket booth is Korean, the taxi driver is Korean, the construction workers, even people in the McDonald's is Korean. And I'm like, I'm not in California anymore. So what's the biggest thing other than like I'm not, there's no Tongans or because you're from Australia, obviously a little bit more diverse background. But what was
Mhm.
the one thing you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here for 5 years and it's gonna.
I think it was just the fact that you could do nothing there unless you knew the language. Like
Mm,
literally, like you couldn't walk out and catch a cab unless you knew how to speak the language. So it was like really hard and really good at the same time, I guess, for us students learning the language. Because if you wanted to like live, you needed to know how to speak, at least speak the language. So that I think that was the biggest thing for me is just like realizing like,
mm,
you could go to so many places around the world and speak English and they'd still understand you,
hmm.
but not there. Like if you don't
Wow.
speak their language,
Right.
you are going nowhere.
Right.
And you are probably even in the restaurants they don't speak English or anything. So the only
Wow.
time that I kind of saw China, the Chinese making an effort to speak English was in the 2008 Olympics. So I
Mm,
was still there at that time. And they were like really making the effort, but
hmm.
um, it's kind of like you don't need English there basically. So
Wow.
they don't really need to. They're only starting to like really learn it now, but Mandarin got them to as far as they are now. So
Right. Right.
um, it was just it was just a shock. Like I couldn't walk into a shop and be like, "Oh, I speak English. Can someone help me?" And no one. They just look at me like,
Right.
"No."
Right. Yeah, it's crazy because, so even as a Korean American, when you go to Korea, at least I can understand, right?
Mm,
It is a different culture, but there are similarities because obviously my parents are Korean.
yeah.
And so when I think about going to other countries without English, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can make it. Because I
Mm,
was in China for like a 10-hour layover.
yeah.
And I think you're right. Now I'm starting to remember when I went to the restaurants in the airport,
Yeah.
like it's an international airport, you would
Yeah.
think. But when I went to the airport, I was like, no, they don't
Yeah.
speak English. So, how did you feel about that, like living there and trying to learn the language? What was going some through your head and emotions?
Um, I think for me it was all right. Like it was just more motivation to like actually learn
Wow.
already. Um, and I really liked it there. It's just I think the reason why it has such a special place in my heart
Mhm.
is because it was the first time I was away from home. That
Mm,
I felt like as soon as I got off the plane, that's when I actually like, okay, I'm like grown now. Like I don't
right.
live at home. I don't do. I have to do everything
Wow.
myself, and so I think I just embraced the experience.
Mm,
So it wasn't as bad as and you're a student, so
mhm.
you're there, you have to learn anyway. So
Right, right.
it's all right.
And how did I guess, the culture accept you? Did you feel any racial tensions or anything like that?
Um,
Here we
no,
go.
I'm only smiling because, like, one of my first experiences in China was standing outside a post office, and I
Mm,
was there with my cousin. Funnily enough, when I arrived in China, there were three other Tongans in Beijing,
mm.
and two of them were my cousins, so that
Yeah.
really worked out. But I was standing outside a post office, and this man, elderly man, just comes up to me and starts like talking like really really fast, which I then find out later is not fast, it's just the normal pace that we talk.
Ah,
And I just stood there, and then he kept going on for like 2 3 minutes, and then he realized that I wasn't responding to anything he was saying, and then he was just like, huh, and then he walked away. And then
wow.
my cousin comes up to me and she's like, what did he sound like? Well, I have no idea what he said because I was still there like the first 2 weeks of me being there. And she was like, do you know why he said that? And I was like, no. He's like, he thought you were Chinese.
Wow.
But there are a
Wow.
lot of like small minorities. I think
Mm.
36, if I remember correctly. And I kind of look like one of those minority groups. So he
Oh.
just thought that I was one of them. And so to answer your question, like,
Yeah.
did I feel out of place? Not really, because a lot of them thought that I had Chinese blood in me. So they just like,
Oh.
oh yeah, she just came from overseas, maybe. But like, if I something I used to always tell the taxi drivers was like one of my parents were Chinese, and they'd always say like, oh yeah, I know, I can see it.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting, huh?
Mm,
Wow, your experience is quite different than some of the experiences I've heard before, and especially even my experience when it comes to going into Chinese-owned businesses and other not just Chinese, but just any other ethnicity, cultures. The first thing sometimes we feel is, what are they thinking about us?
oh yeah.
And is it always positive?
Hmm.
Or is there some type of negativity, or is there some type of stereotypes or prejudice, presupposed prejudice that we can have? And so but it seems like your experiences was quite positive. So
Mhm.
was it like that, or were there incidents where you're like, we might have to check this?
Um, Most of it was positive.
Mm,
Um, did I experience some prejudice? Maybe sometimes. Um,
yeah.
but I don't think that you could just limit that to one country. There are always going to be places and people that are not as enlightened, I guess, and don't have not seen diversity as we see it
Mm,
here. So I really wouldn't put it down to that. But most of it, um, in my own experience,
hmm.
uh, was good. I did see some, but you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk to me about, because I think what I know about you is your family is Methodist, right? You grew up in the Methodist expression, and so how was church like in China? Were you able to go, or how was that?
Um, the
Or
good
did
thing
you
about
go? I mean, am I doing too much? Is your parents listening to this? They're like, I knew it. She never went.
we were really blessed. I think I don't know if it was my second year in China or third year. Um, the Tongan embassy to China was established. So
Wow.
when that happened, a lot of students came over. I think there was a group of scholarship students there were 20 of them that came in 1 year, I think. So
Wow.
that was really good. And the reason why I say that, because one of the students there, he was like a student pastor. He was kind of like our pastor for the
Mm,
students there. So the embassy was able to host church every Sunday for our students, which was
wow.
a real, like, that was a great blessing. We had
Right.
the best ambassador. um, but
Wow.
yeah, so I did go to church when the embassy came.
Yeah. Because
um,
because church is not allowed, right, in China?
um,
Or if it's not government sanctioned, right?
I was able to go to church apart from going to the embassy, which
Mhm.
was just a normal, like, this was a Catholic church.
Right. Right, right, right.
Um, it is allowed,
Mm,
from what I understand and what I've experienced. Like, I have a lot of like there were like African congregations as well
mm,
meeting in like hotel conference rooms and that,
right,
and they were pretty big, but it was kind of it wasn't promoted.
right.
You
Right,
know,
right,
we
right.
know where to go to church by word of ear, like word of
Mm,
mouth. Sorry, word of
mhm.
mouth, but not really like something that you would ever see like being promoted anywhere.
Wow.
Mm,
Yeah, how is your experience with faith growing up in these so many different cultures? Because I know the Tongan culture is very connected with the faith, right? I think
mm.
Tonga is what do you call it? Where it's run not run by, but it is governed by theocracy, kind of, right? So because the the religion is kind of in the culture, or that's how they were raised,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's very huge part. It's not a theocracy, but it's a huge part of it.
It
And
is.
so how were you able to express that in these different places where you lived? Because everywhere you go, it's a little bit different. You have to find community and all these
Yeah.
things.
Um, Growing in my faith has really like changed over the years. Like
Mm.
in Australia, we would go to church once in a while. Not as
Wow.
often as we would go to church in Tonga.
Wow.
So when we went back to Tonga, Nafe's probably already told you, in Tonga, we have church Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, and then even after that, we may have other programs as well. So church was a much bigger thing when I
And
went back.
Sunday, Tonga's like shut down. Like,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Sunday is we still keep the Sabbath,
Hmm.
so nothing is open, everything is closed, and if any business opens, they will be fined.
Mm.
Like it's a very big thing for us to
Hmm.
make sure that we keep the Sabbath. But
Hmm.
um, moving around, I think it was hard to grow because of the differences. I think for me, when even going to China and then coming back to New Zealand, I think it was more like a feeling of just, something familiar
Mm.
going home to, and it was like a home away from home, really, in
Mm.
China, to go to church and be around the
Mm.
Tongans and
Yeah.
at the embassy, and then coming to New Zealand was like always something familiar, even though I hadn't
Mm.
been in New Zealand, lived before. But to go to church is like to go back to a family that you were kind of already uh,
Right.
grown up with. And then um, it was only in Australia when I went back the second time that I didn't have a Methodist church that I was very close to
Hmm.
in where I live. So I ended up going to another church, which was kind of it was like a sister church of like Hillsongs. So it's
Okay. Yeah.
Pentecostal.
Yeah. It's Australia,
Um,
so Hillsong is big.
yeah, so that was a Pentecostal church, and that
Yeah.
that was really good. And then I
Okay.
came here. So
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that you said about like church being home away from home. And I think that's what a lot of what I tended to see when I was growing up too.
mm,
Nothing knows this, and a lot of listeners know. I grew up in a pastor's family. My grandmother and my dad is a pastor,
mhm,
um, and um, and so one of the things, and coming from a homogenous culture, they when they would start their church, obviously in America, if you don't speak English, and if you're not raised in a certain type of American culture, you stick to your own.
yeah,
And it's also, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but at the same time, there can be challenges with that because you can be so insular, right? You only have the capacity to care about your own ethnic group,
mm,
and it worked out well for a little bit because obviously when immigrants come, they're not raised in a certain type of culture.
yeah,
But then what happens when people get together? They got kids, right?
yeah,
Kids pop out, and so depending on where they live, like for me, instance, growing up in a certain culture, sometimes it doesn't match what
mm,
my thinking of faith or my thinking of theology and all these things. And it can be challenging for some, uh, for the next generation, but for also the next generation, some of them can slip right into the familiarity of cultural type of home and what church means in a more cultural way.
mhm,
And me and Nafe had a lot of conversation when it comes to this. And so and she said, and he said, well, my wife has a totally different experience. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think it means for church. Is it supposed to be a cultural sense of home, or do we kind of lean into this new creation, right? This new identity that we see and hear in the Bible and being preached? What are
yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Um, I think like you said, like when people immigrate here, which I see, I can only really speak on the Tongan
Hmm.
community because I am. But when they come here, a lot of them don't speak the language, so one of the most familiar things for them is going to church, and that is like you said, a home away from home, and um, which is good because they can keep or like, how do you call it, nurture their tradition
Hmm.
in and their culture within the
Preserve, right?
church, preserve
Preserve.
it,
Hmm.
preserve it. But like you said, as soon as they're second generation, third generation, and then there's a problem because
Mm,
the culture is no longer being preserved or nurtured in the environment that where it started,
mm.
and
That's right.
that's going to be a problem because things that may have worked back home will not work here. And I
Mm,
think I've really experienced that because when I was in when we went back to Tonga, um, and I started high school there, it was really hard for me to understand a lot of the Tongan culture in the
mm.
beginning because I only knew how to be Australian, you know, and then just understanding why do you do this and why is it done that way, and sometimes like just having to do things just because that's
Mm,
how it's always been done, is very hard to understand if you hadn't been brought up in that. But I think we moved back to Tonga when I turned 13 in Tonga, so I think it was a great age to be able to still see the differences,
mhm.
and accept them for what it was, but then choose what I thought was good. I think that is something that a lot of us who have just grown up in one place and have had to deal with like a second generation immigrants, like
Mhm.
it's hard for them to be able to understand and accept
Right.
what it is and move forward with that. But for me personally, I've just really chosen to take what I think helps both, is helpful for from both cultures, and move
Right.
forward with that. At the end of the day, I really don't think that culture is a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
But I think the culture that we do need to cultivate and grow is the kingdom culture, the kingdom of
Amen.
God culture.
Amen.
I think that needs, as Christians, that needs to trump everything. Like
Mm.
if your culture that you identify with or you've grown up with is um, how do you say, not the same or is opposite
Mhm.
or is in contention with the kingdom culture that God has given us,
Right.
then we need to let it go.
Mm.
We need to maybe not let it hold us back from doing what
Right.
God has asked us to do, or like
Right.
fulfilling His mission.
Right. That's beautiful. And very well said. Better than nothing. What he said. Better. Very well said. No, he says it good too. But hearing it from especially a woman in a culture where it's where it can be kind of difficult at times to lead and
Mm,
times to express their faith in a in a courageous way, right? I'm going to
mhm,
say it that way, courageous way. What you said about the kingdom culture needs to be number one,
mm,
and the kingdom culture for me is comes from the identity that God has given us for his creation, which we were
mm.
all created in the image of his likeness. And if we believe in that, then we should all be able to come together and worship God.
Yeah,
Now, I do understand the language, but at the same time, language can also be, used in a way to bring us together in the right way, the translations, and we get all that.
yeah,
But if language is not a problem, uh, if language is not the barrier that's holding us back, because then the spirit, I mean, even through language the spirit works, right? The spirit, I remember, I tell this story all the time. I remember having 5-hour conversations with a pastor in Mexico, his broken English, my broken Spanish, and we're just talking
yeah,
about the Holy Spirit.
yeah,
What can do that? Only the spirit. And even this conversation,
yeah,
me and you, I don't know you,
mm,
like you, like I don't know you, you don't know me. We're we know nothing, but because of this kingdom culture that we have,
yeah,
we're able to just become brothers and sisters. And that's what the Bible calls us to be, right? One
absolutely.
body, one family. And
Mm,
it's so refreshing to hear it. And so, what are some of the things that you see, especially in the church, especially for women of color, that you think, we might have to change some of these things, or what are you doing in your ministry right now to kind of lead that kingdom culture type of life?
Um, for me, I think right now, like in the present, I think for women and for people in general, but I guess I can speak on the
Mhm.
women. It's like I really want to be able to um, speak unity
Mm,
into the community because I feel like, especially in this time that we're in, we're given so many things where we can be divided against each
mm,
other in. And that is not kingdom culture.
mm,
And I think that's very hard for me to sit and see is that we have taken some, to a certain extent, directive from the outside world. We have
mm,
taken our directive on how to move forward and how to lead from the secular world, when we ourselves should be looking to God, to His truth, to get our directive from Him. And when
mm,
we do, we know that divisiveness is not what He wants for us. He doesn't
mm,
want division. He doesn't. Um, our own uniqueness is not for us to be divided. It
mm.
is, I think it's more of a reason to come together. Like it's just like the Trinity, unity in diversity, all in
Mm,
one. And I think that we were made to be diverse. So,
mm.
well, the main part is not to be bored, but really,
Not
like
to be bored, you're right.
that's supposed to.
That's probably the that's probably the best the best answer. Why are we diverse? Because we're gonna get bored if we're not. That's good. Uh,
But we were not made to be diverse, so we could all just be like separate. Like we were made
right.
to be in community, and
Yeah,
diversity is supposed to like enrich our lives, not
that's right.
make us divided. And I think
Mm,
that's really what I want to see more in the ministry is like not bringing reasons
right.
or things that make us different and making them more. Giving them power to divide us,
Mm,
but bringing them and actually giving them, making them a reason for us to become united. Embracing different cultures is a beautiful thing. Like,
mm,
if that's something that I would definitely recommend to everyone is to travel and understand and experience different cultures because um, ignorance is not bliss.
mm.
Bliss is being able to experience that
That's
and
right.
we're all God's creations.
Right.
No one is less than anyone else. We were made uh, equal in value,
Mm.
different, but equal in value. And I truly believe that that's what we need right now. Like, we don't need reasons to be divided. We need to bring our diversity and unify together as one because that's what God wants. Well, I believe.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and the funny thing is what you were talking about it. I just like kind of recapped, like you're telling me your life story, and I believe that God has brought you to this specific place because of the experiences that you have, and that's why you can talk into it. A Tongan girl living in Australia, going to China, going back in Tonga, and now in Hawaii or Kauai, in a Methodist church. All those experience, I feel. Is going to be so beneficial, especially in your role as partnering with Nafe in the church, of saying, "Hey, it's okay to be
Mm,
different, because we have a unifying factor
mm,
that's so much more powerful, and not
yeah,
just in the power sense, but power in a sense where we don't have, right? We can't bring people together just because
mm,
we like something.
yeah,
We're brought together because God created us to be together.
yeah.
Amen. And so,
Amen.
talking to you, I just, started, thinking about, my experiences, and, I've told this story before. When I first got to a church where there was a Tongan fellowship, I didn't know what Tongans were, right? I knew Samoans, and I got corrected a lot of times that they're not the same, which I was like, yes, I know. It's like saying Korean and Chinese ain't the same. You better
Yeah.
believe it. You know what I mean? And so when I first got to the church, they were doing a communion, they're doing sacraments, and then usually during sacraments they play a song,
mm,
for the mood or whatever, for the ambience. And there was no music, and I was like, what's going on? Is this like a dead church? All of a sudden you see the Tongan fellowship burst out with a hymn.
yeah,
Now, I didn't know the language. I mean, I didn't understand the words, but I knew the song.
mm.
And because I knew the song, you know what? If there was an altar call, I would have went to it. I was a pastor, even though I was a pastor, I would have went and gave my life to Jesus again,
Mm,
because it was so powerful to see, like you said, the gifts that culture
mm,
brings to bring people together. And I do believe, which I do agree with you, I think God has created, a culture is a gift that God has given us or created
mhm,
in us to bring us together, to
yeah,
to unify the body for His glory. So we won't get bored and and stale, and because then we can start going into ourselves, and that's another
yeah.
terrible thing that what happens. So yeah, so so what are you doing right now as far as ministry wise, in the position that you're in?
Um, I think right now I'm just trying to be the best yoke mate that I can to Nafe.
Yeah.
I'm actually
He needs it, trust me.
I actually have always thought of myself as being someone that's behind the scenes. I don't like being in front or at the
Mm,
center of anything. I'm
mhm.
more like behind the curtains, doing what needs to be done there. But really, just helping with whatever needs to be done. I think the biggest thing is really he may be the pastor in charge or the leader of the church here in West Kauai, but what really gets us is like we're only here to be servant leaders,
That's
to
right.
lead in
That's right.
serving. So as long as we're serving others, God and others, I
Right.
think that's the main thing that we're doing right now, in whatever capacity we can.
Wow, wow. Yeah, and what is a word that you can give to maybe, women in ministry right now that maybe feel discouraged at times because of, sometimes, the limited, I guess, or not empowerment that they feel in the church. Because Nafe, I know he supports you and
Mhm,
he raises you up in a way where you guys share the same platform, you guys share responsibilities,
mhm.
and he sees as an equal. We're still working on that in the church, right? We're still working on the world. You know what I mean? And so, what is one of the an encouragement word that you can give to women that they feel called in the ministry, and but my church supporting me? I don't know. What do you think?
I think I think I really want I say like God is faithful.
Mm,
Don't be discouraged. God is always faithful, and if He has put a calling in your life, we are all called to ministry in whatever way we are. But if you do feel like He has called you specifically to minister or become a leader in the church, don't let human limitations um, make you think that that's going to negate God's calling on your life. You know, He is always faithful, and if you stay faithful, you will see that too. But I think, like it's funny to me to say that. Oh yeah, you're a woman in ministry. Never in 1,000 years would I ever have thought that I'd be here. A
mm,
woman in ministry, or even a pastor's wife, is it's just an amazing. Like that's a miracle within itself to think that. But and I know that Nafa testifies to this as well. Is that like when you're obedient to His calling, God is always faithful, and He will always make a way. I know
mm.
it kind of sounds like cliche to hear that.
Oh,
We hear
uh,
it a lot in our songs
you-
and that, but um, I can wholeheartedly testify. Like they don't write songs because it doesn't happen. They write these kind of songs like God is faithful and He always makes a way because it does
it
happen.
happens.
It
That's true.
happens all the time. So it really is a proclamation that many of us can testify to. So I think
Yeah.
that's it. God is faithful. Stay faithful to your calling, and He will stay faithful to you.
That's beautiful. I've learned so much from you in these last 43 minutes than I've learned in some of these other calls. I mean, the other calls were good, but I think today, for some reason, maybe it's because I'm more awake. You're more awake. It's not
But both
6
ways.
This might be a good time actually, because I am getting a little bit more viewers too. So a lot of good things are happening, and
Mm,
so Mele, I just wanted to thank you so much for just giving me your time and giving me your heart, just to know a little bit more about your life, just to know what God is doing in you, and I can't wait to go out there. I can't wait. I'm checking
and
like
you
this.
know the invitation's always been there for you and your
I'm
family, so
I
we're
know.
too.
I can't wait. So the and Nafe was like, yeah, bro, I got like 3 rooms. It's not being used, and I was like, well, don't use it. Don't bring anybody up until I come. And so I can't wait to go and just spend time with you guys, listen to more of your heart,
Mm,
and just hang out. Hang out. And so thank
absolutely.
you so much for taking this call with me. Before we go, can you do something? I don't know if you can say it, but can you say thank you for watching Coffee Call in Mandarin?
谢谢大家来到 Coffee Call，欢迎你们下次再来。
That is beautiful. Well, God bless you, Millie, and everything that God has put in your heart, and continue to walk strong. And thank you guys for watching Coffee
Yeah.
Call. And I can't wait. And just, continue to stay updated through the Instagram at freelife.cc. And so we have another great person in a couple of weeks coming on. His story is amazing. He's Congolese, so I can't wait to talk to him about what's going on too. So thank you again, Millie, and
Thank
God bless you.
you.
Peace.